Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's review, we are going to be jumping into a couple different fruit beers, and while they should be both distinctly different, they do absolutely share some commonality. Um, the first beer for today is going to be Energy City Brewing Company's Milkshake Waka. This is a milkshake fruit ale. It's brewed with raspberry, vanilla, and lactose. Clocks in at 6.2% ABV, and they are based in Batavia, Illinois. Number two, we did a collaborative brew review a few episodes ago that featured this brewer. This is going to be Destination Unknown, and this is called Berry Necessary. It's a fruited sour ale brewed with blackberry, blueberry, and strawberry, and it also has lactose in it. So kind of the common ground here is berry fruit beers and lactose, though one's sour, one's not. And the milkshake style, most people commonly associate it with the milkshake IPAs, but certainly any beer style, you can get that milkshake effect by adding enough lactose, and it definitely sweetens it up and it thickens the beer up, as well as typically makes it go cloudy just due to the addition. This one clocks in at 5.4%. Destination Unknown is located in Bayshore, New York. That's on Long Island, right next to Islip. So we've got two big milkshake-like fruited beers, not even one ABV between the bunch, and both have lactose added. So I'm expecting these are going to be very fruity, maybe a bit sweet. This one may be a bit sweet and sour, but I expect that the fruit that they added in to really come through quite strongly because of that added lactose. So we're going to jump right in, starting with Energy City Brewing's Milkshake Waka. This is the raspberry, vanilla, and lactose milkshake ale, clocking in at 6.2% ABV. Okay, so jumping right in with the first beer of today's fruit, kind of milkshake lactosed up review here. We've got Energy City Brewing. This is Milkshake Waka. It's a fruit milkshake ale, raspberry, vanilla, and lactose. They're based in Batavia, Illinois. Batavia. I'm not sure if you know the correct pronunciation. Let me know, please, down in the comments. 6.2% ABV on this one. So I expect, it's got a higher ABV for fruited ale, and it's a milkshake style. It's got vanilla, raspberry, lactose. I expect this is going to be a big, thick, fruity, delicious beer. In terms of label art, it's very clean. It's just a very, very clean design. But they do have on the side vanilla raspberry hops, and they do show kind of a classic milkshake style glass on the bottom. But nonetheless, that's about all in terms of the label. So let's get this bad boy cracked gently. There we go. Pour it in the glass. We'll see if it's a bright red. Kind of anticipate. It's more of a pink color, almost reminiscent of pink grapefruit juice. It's kind of the shade that it's giving off here. And it does appear to be pretty thick as I'm pouring this. I know it's hard to tell on camera with a lighter color such as this, but it did look rather thick as I poured it. So, looks to be very, very active in terms of effervescence and carbonation for sure. There's a lot of activity. It looks like mostly medium-sized bubbles. I don't see a lot of fine champagne-like or very large ones. It did form a little bit of a head, but not much. There's so much active carbonation, it's just going to knock anything it tried to form out of the way. Some milkshake-style beers do, some don't. This one didn't. And it is kind of a taupe color, I guess would be the best way to describe it. And it's very occluded. It's very cloudy. Let's give it a sniff. It smells very fruity. It smells very fruity and almost smells, this one's not supposed to be sour, but it does smell like it has a little bit of a tang to it. Obviously, raspberry is naturally kind of a sour, tart, sweet fruit. So I'm sure that's coming from the raspberry element, but it smells very nice. Don't really detect the vanilla on the aroma at all, but we'll see when we jump in, so let's dive right in. Ooh. Okay, so I could tell you flavor-wise, it has some elements that I did expect, and it's got some surprising elements. So as I mentioned, on the side of the label, they show you vanilla raspberry hops. The hops really do come through quite strongly and clearly in this beer. Much more akin to a milkshake IPA, which they don't call it a milkshake IPA. They specifically call it Milkshake Waka Raspberry. Just milkshake style ale with XYZ. Now they do mention that they're using Wakatu and Motika hops, which they state on here has notes of strawberry, kiwi, and lime. Then they add the raspberries for tartness. Now I can tell you with those hop varieties, they're spot on the money. And the lime in particular is one key flavor that those hops are bringing to the table that's making its way into this beer. So it almost has this raspberry lime quality to it. There's a hint of strawberry. It's more of a suggestion. It's very, very background than an ever-present, oh wow, that's like a mix of strawberry and raspberry. But the lime traits that the hops are bringing to the table definitely makes its way into this. So it's almost got this, what's the best way to describe it? Almost like a Goza-like quality if they had salted lime mixed with raspberry. That's really how this is coming across. And it's kind of nice. So it reminds me a bit of if you were to throw raspberry in your salted lime tequila shot. That's really the vibe I'm getting here, sans the tequila flavor, of course. But it's very, very good. It's got a very interesting and unique flavor I didn't anticipate. And the hop forward nature of this is really coming through far more clearly than I anticipated, but it's very, very enjoyable. I'm going to jump in for another sip. Think about this body and mouthfeel while I explore these flavors. The body is surprisingly large for the ABV. Not uncommon in the milkshake style beer. It feels medium heavy. It's really big. Really, really big. Very present. The mouthfeel is the same story. It's very thick. It's very, very thick. If you do start to agitate it at all around the palate, it gets ridiculously creamy and even thicker. That's a common trait with these milkshake style beers that I've discovered. And I do see why they're hugely popular. It's a very unique beer drinking experience. It's very enjoyable. They're heavy though. It's not a beer that you're going to be slamming. It's one you're going to be taking your time to sip and enjoy. And as it warms up, you know, even from British cellar temperature here, 55 degrees, it's going to just get even richer and deeper with all these flavors. And it's got that underlying thickness. So they are heavy beers. You can almost think of them as dessert style beers, like big, heavy imperial stouts or a big, heavy barley wine. They're that heavy. They have that much presence. You're not going to be slamming these. I suppose you could, but I think you'd feel awful if you did. And craft beer is really not meant to be slammed. Let's save that for the cheap mass market garbage. You want to slam some. Craft beer is meant to be sipped and enjoyed at the appropriate temperature, so all the flavors and all the artisan, craft and all of the skills that the artisan put into making the beer can really come to show. And, take your time. Just enjoy it on each sip for what it is. Very big body, very big mouthfeel. I can tell you before I jump in for my final kind of test of where these flavors start and where they progress and where they finish, the balance I really appreciate. I thought for sure this was going to be super raspberry intensive, and the raspberry's there, but it's all balanced. Just like I didn't expect the hops to come through that clearly. They come through very clearly, crystal clearly. And the traits that they bring to the table are far more pronounced in this beer than any beer I have ever had. So those kind of lime and the strawberry, they mentioned kiwi as well. There's a hint of that. It's not the strongest flavor, but you get a bit of it. And it really does pair with kind of the strawberry in the background. The lime's a lot more present, and it's almost on par with the raspberry. So it's got this interesting fruity and acidic and tart and slightly sour nature. It's got a little mix of everything in this big, bold, thick package with a nice hop bite. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. It's not what I expected, but in a good way. Gonna jump in for flavors. You first get it in your mouth and you taste that fruitiness. And it's this mix of hop funk, fruit, acidity, tartness, and sour. And it's kind of astringent up front for the first few seconds. And the lime mixed with all those, it's kind of suggesting a briny quality, almost like a salty quality, but I think it's just the combination of flavors. That's where my brain's going. And it's really, really nice. I could tell you it's very pungent and bold and astringent up front for the first few seconds. Then by about the 5-second mark, it really starts to quickly dive down off. So the bell curve would almost be shaped like whoosh, almost a straight up, and then a hold, a little bit of a plateau, and then a very quick right out. And the finish is not very long on this. What you're left with, and it really dissipates completely out of the way within about 10 to 15 seconds, but what you're left with on the end is this underlying raspberry, strawberry, lime, hint of kiwi, dominated by hop, lingering hop. And it's not lingering bitters. Those come on with the intensity up front. It's just the actual hop flavors themselves. And you can taste that hoppiness with the fruit. And it's really delicious. This is a very nice beer. It's not what I expected, and I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm going to take my time sipping on this. I will come up with my scores, and when we come back, we will get to beer number 2. That is Destination Unknown's Berry Necessary, the fruited sour ale, blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, and lactose. That one clocks in at 5.4% ABV. Okay, now moving on to the second beer of today's fruit beer review, we've got Destination Unknown's Berry Unnecessary. This is a fruit sour ale with blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, and lactose. This one's a little lower ABV than the first at 5.4%. They are based out of Bayshore, New York. So first thing in terms of label art, it's very bright. And obviously, berry unnecessary. It is just covered in piles of berries. And it's got a very bright label. Kind of gets you in the mood for cracking into a nice berry-filled beer. So without further ado, let's get this cracked. Gently. All right. And poured in the glass. So blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, and lactose. I imagine this is going to have a purpley red. Ooh, this is indeed a purpley red. It looks kind of like a more purple version of framboise pouring out. And it is a sour, so it's probably going to try to form a head at the start and mostly scoot out of the way. It may hold a little longer with the addition of that lactose. As you can see, it's quite thick as I was pouring it, but it absolutely looks fantastic. Visually, that is a very thick, occluded beer. It is a dark, dark purple red. It's just beautiful. I can see, it's probably impossible to see in the camera, but it is quite effervescent and it's moving quite vigorously. It's got kind of a mix of smaller and medium-sized bubbles. I don't see any really large ones, but small and medium, and it does appear to be quite active. Yeah, it did form a head, but that's already more or less scooted out of the way. It's just got a tiny, tiny, thin little pad. The carbonation is pushing it up, and the head that it did try to form, it's just killing it. And on a sour, frankly, that's what I want. It's what's most appropriate. Let's give it a sniff. Wow. That smells very, very fruity. That smells very fruity. You can for sure smell it's a blend of berries. It would be a little hard to say, oh, I smell that berry, I smell that berry. It smells like a blend of berries. I can't individually pick out, oh, that's blackberry I smell, that's blueberry, that's strawberry I smell, but it smells like a hodgepodge of berries. So I expect this is going to be very, very fruit forward. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Oh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. Okay, so this is a very good beer. This is very fruit forward. It's very berry intense. You do get that nice sour and tart kick up front, and it's got a greater intensity to it than I anticipated. Oh, it's been about 10 seconds since that sip went down, and this malt bill is coming through. Gosh, this is really good. This is a really good recipe they put together here. Okay, so the sour and the tart, it kicks in pretty big up front for about 3 seconds, and then it dissipates, and you're just loaded with berries. The lactose they added is enough to let the berries speak and give just the slightest hint of sweetness, but it's not what I would call a sweet beer. It's not like a milk stout or anything where it's intentionally got a lot of lactose to sweeten it up. It's got enough to let the berries speak. And even in my first sip, I didn't individually say, oh, that's blueberry, oh, that's blackberry, oh, that's strawberry. It, again, still just tasted like a mixture of berries, an amalgam, but it's very clearly a berry-flavored beer. And the fruit came through clearly, as did the big sour and the tart up front. Now, after about the 10-second mark, when the flavor started to back off a bit, the malt bill came through to the forefront. And it had this very nice Goza-like quality to it. So it was very much that baked good, that kind of biscuit, toast, crumb, crusty, crackery, very much a baked good malt bill. And it just made this super clean malt flavor on the back end and nice crispness. It did have a little bit of dryness to it, which is common with sour beers, and it just helps make that nice clean crispness to it. So up front you get that big sour tart punch, and then you get all of the berries in full force, and then they finish off by a classic dryness with this just baked good malt bill that comes through fully and crystal clearly. This is a very, very good beer. It's a very, very good beer indeed. I'm going to take another sip of this and explore the body and mouthfeel while I think a little harder on what it is I'm tasting in this berry mixture. The body is a solid medium to medium heavy. It's on the high end of medium, low end of medium heavy. It's so much bigger than a 5.4% ABV would let on, and the mouthfeel is equally big. If anything, this feels bigger than the first beer did, and it's 0.8% ABV lower. 5.4, that's not very high, but this beer feels huge. The lactose they added really thickened it up and really added substance to both the body and the mouthfeel. If you agitate it around the palate, just as with the first, it gets ridiculously creamy and even thicker. It is just joyful to have on the palate. That's the best way I can describe it. It really is a treat. It feels great on the palate. It feels so much bigger than the ABV would let on. This feels like a very big, robust, substantive beer. And it tastes just absolutely fantastic. I'm going to dive in one more time here for this flavor development. Sour tart, fruit, strawberry comes through clearly. Blueberry and blackberry kind of blend together. I'd say it's roughly 50% strawberry and 25-25 blueberry, blackberry. And I love all of them, so it's hard for me to say, oh, it's unbalanced, or I would have preferred the, forget that kind of nitpicking. They do all come through clearly. You can taste them independently, and honestly, I like the balance. Strawberry is a flavor you don't get a ton in beers, and it's really quite delicious, and this is a great platform for adding strawberry. Go ahead and throw it in with some other additional berries, and the fact that they let the strawberry kind of take the lead, it's really quite nice. Blackberry, blueberry, they get used a lot in beers. Strawberry is less common, and it's a lot more delicate berry. The intensity of flavor isn't as great as it is in a blueberry or a blackberry. So they clearly added a greater volume of strawberry to let that come to the forefront, but I love the balance of it. It's so good. I wish you could taste this. I wish you could. It's so good. This is such a nice beer. I like everything about this. The balance of it, the intensity of the sour and the tart, the length of all of the various aspects, and just the wonderful malt bill that comes through in that beautiful, clean, crisp finish. It is just a home run of a beer. I absolutely love this one. I'm going to take my time, sip on this, comment my scores. When we come back, we will get both beers ranked from top to bottom. Okay, now that we've gotten to enjoy both of these beers, we're going to get them ranked, starting with the Energy City Brewing Company's Milkshake Waka. This was a fruit milkshake ale brewed with raspberry, vanilla, and lactose. Clocks in at 6.2% ABV. They are based out of Batavia or Batavia, I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments, please. Illinois. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was nice. It was certainly more pungent than your average beer. I could get a decent sense of the raspberry for sure, but I couldn't detect the vanilla really anywhere in there, which I would have liked to pick up. It also had kind of a hoppy aroma to it, little undertones, which I didn't expect, but it smelled nice. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the taste, really enjoyed this one. Again, as a milkshake fruit milkshake ale, you know, it's got fruit and vanilla and lactose. I didn't expect for the hops to come through as boldly as they did, but it was a very welcome addition. I really appreciated it. Yet again, really for my money though, I was missing the vanilla, both in the aroma and the flavor, so I did dock 1 point. I would have liked to have that in there. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the body, as with most milkshake style beers, it was positively huge. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, same story here. Very thick, viscous beer style. It was exactly as anticipated. It gets a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish on this beer was not particularly long at all. Overall, it really fell in the average range, and I kind of would expect that with a fruit beer, but since it had a very hop present nature to it, I did expect the hop flavors to at least linger around and let some of those underlying bitters play out, but it didn't. It gets squarely average 5 out of 10. Head and retention. This was a category that surprised me. Milkshake ales, they're very thick and creamy, and you start to aggressively pour them and they just want to go everywhere. This barely formed a head and barely retained any at all. It only gets a 2 out of 10. For the appearance, this was a nice looking beer. Admittedly, it wasn't as bright, kind of ruby red color as I anticipated. It looked more like the color of pink grapefruit juice in the glass and kind of occluded. It wasn't bad looking, just not what I expected. It gets a 9 out of 10. For the balance, overall, I really enjoyed the balance on this beer, and I'll come back to this. I really appreciated the addition of the hops and the fact that they actually made their presence known in a fruit milkshake style beer. You don't get that a lot. But the one sticking point for me was I really couldn't get that vanilla. If I had gotten that, I probably would have given it top marks. As it stands, it gets a 9 out of 10. Filling in the intangible. Really enjoyed it. I truly did. I enjoyed this beer immensely. Very kind of an interesting take on a milkshake style beer because of the hops, notably. For me, I really appreciate it. I'm a big hop fan, and it didn't throw off the overall vibe of the fruit milkshake beer. But I'll come back to this. I just wanted that vanilla, and I didn't get it. I docked 1 point. It gets a 9 out of 10. Finally, is an example of the style. There's a ton of different milkshake style beers out there, a lot of milkshake IPAs, a lot of different fruit milkshake beers, but this one was rather unique in the fact that it did use hops to go in this fruit and lactose laden milkshake beer style. It wasn't even trying to be an IPA, but it got more hops in there than the average milkshake IPA. I really appreciated that. It's just coming back to vanilla for me again to keep it from top marks. It gets a 9 out of 10. That brings the total score on Energy City Brewing's Milkshake Waka to a 79 out of 100. So this is definitely an above average beer, and it lost some points, pretty good points in a couple different categories that really dragged the overall score down. But I have to rank it in these categories how I experienced it. That said, I definitely think the beer is a stronger and better offering than my objective scoring would belie. Certainly, I really enjoyed it. I think it's one to seek if you're a fan of the milkshake style beers, and especially if you like a little hoppy back to it. It's definitely a good one. Moving on to beer number 2, we've got Destination Unknown's Berry Necessary. This is a sour ale brewed with blackberry, blueberry, strawberry, and lactose. Clocks in at 5.4% ABV, and they are based out of Bayshore, New York. So not a milkshake style, but that lactose addition definitely imparted some of the same characteristics, very common with these. Starting with the aroma. The aroma on this beer was very nice. Really the only thing I could say is it wasn't ridiculously pungent, and I couldn't detect all of the fruits independently, really. It smelled more like an amalgam and berry kind of. I couldn't pick that out, say, oh, that's blackberry, blueberry, strawberry. But it smelled nice, certainly above average pungency. It gets a 7 out of 10. For the taste, The taste, a completely different story. What I was lacking in clarity of ingredients in the aroma, it came full force, perfectly clearly in the flavor. I absolutely could independently taste all of the berries. I also really liked the way that they balanced it out, which we'll get to that on the balance, but the taste was fantastic. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the body, as expected, that lactose addition made this beer just huge. I anticipated it and I got it. It gets a 10 out of 10. Mouthfeel, same story here, just thick, dense, lush beer. Exactly what I expected. It gets a 10 out of 10. For the finish on this one lasted quite a bit longer than on the first beer, which kind of surprised me, being that it really was just fruit-based, you know, kind of sour. The sour did help to cause a little bit, that sour tart, though most of the intensity of that came up front and got out of the way. It was just really a story of this nice blend of fruit. But the flavor really did linger around for quite a long time, especially for the style. Certainly above average. It gets an 8 out of 10. Head and retention. Head and retention really was excellent for a sour. It wasn't billed as a milkshake style. Sure, it had that lactose to help thicken it up, but at its heart, it was a fruited sour beer. And it did try to form a head at the beginning, and then it very quickly got out of the way, which is exactly what I want and expect on a sour. I only docked 1 point because of the time I had to wait, but it still gets a 9 out of 10. For the appearance, this beer was lovely. This actually looked exactly like I expected the first one to look, and it was just beautiful to behold. Just a deep ruby red, beautiful mix of strawberry, blackberry, blueberry. It was lovely. 10 out of 10. For the balance. The balance is one of the things I think this beer really excelled at. I talked about this a little bit on the flavor, but the balance really came out 50% strawberry, 25 blueberry, blackberry, which strawberry is a much more delicate and not as pungently flavored fruit as blackberry and blueberries are. And it's not a common beer additive, but it worked so beautifully in this beer. And I think if they didn't have a higher volume of strawberry, at least perception-wise to me, compared to the other berries, it could have gotten drowned out. And it was just delicious. The balance was perfect. I loved it. It gets a 10 out of 10. Feeling in the intangible. I loved this beer. I truly did. It was even better than I anticipated it would be. The sour and the tart kick came on strong up front, mixed with the berries, then you could pick them all out, and it was just a lovely beer drinking experience. It gets a 10 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, many fruit sour beers out there. Not that many that I've seen with that combination and then adding the lactose to really thicken it up, but I think it's a recipe for success, and they executed it perfectly in my opinion. Even though it lost a couple points in a couple categories, it gets a perfect 10 out of 10. That brings the total score on Destination Unknown's Very Necessary to a 94 out of 100. So all total, we're looking at a 15-point spread between these two. And if you really look at the categories, this got dinged on a couple specific ones. But frankly, they were both excellent beers. If you like fruit beers, you know, sour and milkshake style, but with a more hoppy back, these are both definitely worth seeking, and I absolutely loved them. I do highly recommend both beers. Folks, that's today's review. As always, I do sincerely appreciate you tuning in today. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you want to stay in the loop when our videos go live to YouTube, you can just click the notification bell icon. It's right next to the subscribe button. Until next time, keep it beer, keep it craft. We'll see you on the next one. Cheers.